Well, good evening. It's good to be back. I've been told that this winter has been a mild winter. It's been pretty warm. But ever since we arrived back in the U.S., it's barely been above freezing. So I'm actually thrilled to have a little bit of snow at least. If it's going to be this cold, I think we might as well have some snow. But yes, it's been a little shock for us leaving Togo in the 80s, 90s, and landing in Grand Rapids, Michigan to 30 degrees. Before I get into my ministry and what I've been doing for the last 13 months since I left you guys to head to Togo, West Africa, you're all curious. I know Pastor's already introduced Anna, but I figured you wanted to hear a little bit from her. So this is Anna. We've been dating since May of last year, and obviously she is someone special to me. But she is a missionary nurse there at the hospital in Mongo, and I'm going to let her share a little bit about her ministry before I go into what I've been doing. Yeah. Did you get the slideshow on? Sorry, I totally forgot. We've got some pictures. Okay. Go ahead.
So he just asked me to share my testimony just so you know me a little bit. I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan to a Christian family with a rich Christian heritage. And so at the age of 4, after hearing a gospel presentation at a church function, I went home and talked to my mom and dad about what I had heard and learned. And it was at that time that I prayed to accept the Lord. And then I was baptized at the age of 9. My church was excellent with camping ministries during the summer. And one summer when I was 13, I remember very distinctly the pastor preached from 1 Corinthians 6:19, and it says, "What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own?" And I remember very distinctly after that praying to God, you know what, you have laid down your life for me. What do I have to withhold anything from you? Where you want me, I will go. And I was a very shy child, so that was a pretty big deal at 13 to say, God, wherever you want to send me, I'll go. My life is not my own to live. And that's what I understood at that age. From then on, I did a lot of missions trips throughout high school and into college as well. And it became increasingly clear that full-time missions was what he had for me. So after a trip to South Africa, I attended Baptist Bible College and got a 4-year degree in Bible and counseling. And then I finished my studies a semester early, so I was able to go to South Africa during that semester. I had wanted to do a longer short-term trip. And so during that time, God really laid on my heart Africa and medical missions. So when I returned, started nursing school soon after, and then applied to ABWE and started pre-field while I was in nursing school. Finished nursing school and had my support raised right at the same time. God was very good to me in doing both of those major things at the same time. And so I was able to leave for language school right after completing my nursing boards, and then on to Togo. So that's a little bit about me and my life story.
So I kind of skipped the beginning part of Togo since most of you were here 13 months ago when I was here and presented. But just a summary for those maybe that weren't here. Togo is in West Africa. It's a very small country. It has a little bit of coastline, and otherwise it's small and skinny, situated between Ghana and Benin. Ghana on the west, Benin on the east, Burkina Faso to the north. I'm serving at the Hospital of Hope in Mongo, Togo, which is in the northern part of Togo. Because Togo is so skinny, it's actually not very far from the Ghana border, and it's also only a couple hours from the northern border with Burkina Faso. Even though Togo, as one country, is somewhat Christian, the southern part of Togo has predominantly Christian, though very mixed with animism. The northern part of Togo is a very Muslim area, and that's where we're going. Mongo is predominantly Muslim, and that is where ABWE was targeting to go after 30 years with a hospital and down in the south, which some of you are familiar with, they had a burden, the missionaries that were there in the south for so many years, had a burden to reach those in the north. Different tribes that live up in the north, and as I already said, predominantly Muslim. So after many years of looking into moving up to the north and finding Mongo, having an enthusiastic response from local leaders in the area saying, yes, we would love to have a hospital come here. We are in need of health care. I believe the first ABW missionaries settled in Mongo in 2008. And since that time, they've been building relationships, eventually broke ground to start building the hospital. And I had the privilege now of being there when we opened the hospital in March of last year, after all those years of many people praying, blood, sweat, tears as they built this hospital, and often an environment that's inhospitable, even though the people are welcoming. It's a desert region, and so a lot of hard work went into building this hospital, much prayer from those around the world, as well as financial support in getting this hospital up and running. I left the U.S. December of last year, when I left you guys. The hospital didn't open until March, and in that time frame between December and March, I helped there with the hospital. Most of the nursing staff, foreign nursing staff, had arrived there in December, and we worked on organizing all the supplies that had come in and had been in containers for some of them for years, for months. And we organized all that stuff. We cleaned the hospital. We finished a lot of the finishing touches of getting the hospital set up and put together, as well as I did 3 weeks down in the Southern Hospital, just orienting to what is it like to do nursing in Togo. I've been a nurse, as you guys know, for almost 10 years in the Navy, but even at times I didn't think we had a lot of resources sometimes in the Navy. I felt like we were missing things. It's nothing compared to mission nursing when you're looking for resources and trying to figure out how to use 100 different varieties of the same item. And so just learning how to do that, how do I interact with patients that I can't always speak to? The predominant language in Togo is French, and even though I did 6 weeks in Tennessee doing a French training course, I'm definitely not fluent in French. And add to that there are, I think they've said, over 80 dialects, different tribal languages in Togo. So you have patients that speak all kind of different languages, and so it does a lot of charades. So that 3 weeks was just an intro of, okay, when the hospital opens, how do we do nursing in Togo? And also that time was used to get to know my fellow missionary staff, my team members, as well as the Togolese staff as well, as we did a couple weeks of orientation, team building with the Togolese staff to be able to come together and be able to function as a team. We went from 0 patients and the hospital not open one day to the hospital open the next day, and that takes a lot. So we had a lot of work to do when I first got there. You can see some of the facts on the screen since we opened in March, and that was a huge celebration. The inauguration day actually was a few days before we opened in the end of February, attended by the President of Togo, the U.S. Ambassador to Togo, among many different tribal leaders from that northern region. Big day of celebration as the community came out in the thousands to celebrate with us as we opened the hospital. And since that opening, we've had over 14,000 patients registered into the hospital system. That's individual patients, and that's not necessarily patient visits. So as you, I'm sure, can figure out, many of those patients have come back multiple times. So patient visits is a lot higher than that. We are still seeing an average, we can only handle about 100 outpatients a day with our providers. We have anywhere from, most of the time I think we have 3, sometimes if on holidays, maybe only 2 providers, medical providers, but we try to have at least 3 providers in the clinic, up to 4 or 5 if staffing allows. And they try to see as many patients as they can, but 100 is about what we can handle. And some days, depending on the season, we're still turning away hundreds at the gate who are triaged as not being urgent. And we just don't have the personnel to be able to see them. And even though that ebbs and flows, it's been pretty consistent since we opened. The most latest data, we had 320 births as of, I think it was 2 days ago. We continue to see births daily, close to daily at least. It's exciting to have the women come in and be able to deliver with us and even follow along with their prenatal care with us and finally have access to prenatal care. We still get many women who show up with none, but be able to help them during this time and give them the medicine they need, the vitamins that they would help in their pregnancy, and then be there for the deliveries, especially when they have premature infants. Our survival rate for premature infants within the hospital is much higher close to 100%, depending on the gestational age of the infant, compared to the rate of those who deliver out at home and then bring their infant in. Sometimes they travel hours, 6 hours with a premature infant, a little 3-pounder, cuddled up against mom on the back of a motorcycle, and they bring the baby in, and we do our best, but that's a long time for a premature infant not to be in the hospital care. So it's a blessing to be able to provide inpatient care for these women when they come in. We're also averaging 20 surgical cases. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, the different cases that our surgeons are able to do, and it varies too on who's coming out. Right now we only have one full-time surgical physician assistant who's been assisted by several short-termers who come out. Sometimes they're specialized, such as an orthopedic doctor. But otherwise we do a lot of hysterectomies, a lot of infections. As you can imagine, it's a very dirty place, and hygiene isn't high on the list of things for the Togolese. They don't have access to indoor plumbing, most of them, or even clean water. And so something small, an insect bite or a small injury, whether working in the field or on a motorcycle accident, and they let it go, and it becomes infected to the point of a bone infection requiring surgery. Traumas, again, from the motorcycle accidents, that's the primary transportation. There in Togo for most people because it's affordable. And so many accidents where you have broken bones with the accidents. And those who can't afford cars, they use them as taxis a lot of times. They drive like crazy, and their cars are not well maintained. So again, they have many accidents with the vehicles or hitting pedestrians with those vehicles as they fly through towns and villages. Let's see some other things. Surprisingly, a lot of prostatectomies. It's a big surgery there. And then cancerous tumors. Sometimes we actually help and we remove a tumor, and sometimes it's so far gone that we can take out some tumors, but unfortunately we have to let them know that there's only so much that we can do in treating their cancer. And so we can help improve their quality of life. But sometimes we have to give the bad news that when we did the operation, we realized that the cancer was more extensive than we anticipated, and there's no way to remove it all. And at this point, for the most part, there's no treatment in the country for cancer. There's not radiation and chemotherapies, though we're starting to do a little bit of that ourselves with the pediatric population in very specific cases. But for most of them, that's just the news that they're going to have to go home and they'll probably will die in the next few months. Also notice their diseases. So malaria, and it was an eye-opening experience for most of us, especially the Western nurses. It lasted probably 3 or 4 months of malaria season, the strong time. I mean, it's always there. But very sick people that would come in, especially kids. Malaria can affect, it shows in different ways. So a lot of times they don't know that they have malaria, that they look like they have a cold or a fever. The kids can get sick. They can start getting sick the night before, and then the parents bring them in the next day, seizing. So it can be a very fast disease. And on the other hand, the parents sometimes aren't able to bring them in right away. They can't afford it, or they live too far away, and they take 2 days to get to us. And again, at that point, it's the malaria parasites has affected the kids' brains, and it was a rough few months for us as we dealt with many sick kids. I think we were at one point averaging at least one death a day with these kids coming in, and at a point where we did our best, but there was only so much that we could do in providing and treating them, and then even if we could keep them alive for so long, neurologically they had already gone too far due to the lack of oxygen with the parasite in their brain. So that's been a tough time for us as we have adjusted and learned how to treat these kids, specifically the kids. Even though adults can get malaria, it's not nearly as bad, not nearly as fast, and they respond very well to treatment. And the children respond well to treatment too if you catch it early enough. And so health prevention, education is a big thing, and that's something I'll mention a little later we look forward to being able to do more of so that these kids receive the treatment they need before they reach us so sick. So our specifically nursing staff, our hospital staff is very international. It is still predominantly Togolese, and that's the way we want it. But we have staff from France and New Zealand, as well as the U.S. I think that hits the major ones right now. But our nursing staff consists of 17 Togolese nurses who were trained at the nursing school down in southern Togo at the hospital. That program, I think this was the fourth or fifth class that they've been able to graduate. They do one class at a time for 3 years. And this class was held with the goal of sending these nurses to Mongo. So in a sense, even though they're employees of the hospital, they're also missionaries because they all left their immediate families or extended families and their churches. Most of them are from tribal groups that are down there in the south and not in the north. And so they had to make that move and transition up to the north as well with us. And it's been a challenge for them. They left a lot what they're familiar with. They don't speak a lot of the local dialects. They speak different dialects. And so they've had to adjust just like the Western nurses. But those nurses are all believers. And so it's an encouragement to be able to work alongside them. Specifically, his name is Yalvi. He's been a nurse. He was not in that nursing class. He was in previous one. He's been a nurse for, I think, almost 11 years now. And he is a nursing supervisor alongside of me. And it's been a blessing to work with him. He loves the Togolese nurse. He loves all the Togolese, of course, and he loves the Togolese nurses. He's very invested in them. And he is great to work alongside and be able to ask him questions and help me know what's going on, those cultural insights that I would have no idea. That's why I would never work as a nursing supervisor on my own. I just don't know cultural insights that he does as being a Togolese. He's able to know how to approach the staff and speak to them as needed. It's very different than a Western way of approaching problems, and so he's able to be there for me and help me in that role. And he's also a great witness then in the community. He's built relationships with his neighbors throughout town. He has a good relationship with the local hospital there in town and some of the people that work there. And I think that's going to be key in the future for our hospital. We need that cooperation between our hospitals, and he's making those connections. And it's a good testimony there in town. Also, it says there are between 10 and 12 Western nurses. Just like me, we had short-term nurses that came for 1 year to 2 years. We've also had some that came for 4 weeks, up to, I think, 3 months. And so our numbers in terms of Western nurses have fluctuated. We've had American and Canadian nurses. I believe we have one coming from Europe here in March. But it's been a blessing to work with them as well. Obviously, these are believers who are interested in missions and want to use nursing to serve God. And so it's been fun to work with them. We come from different places and different experiences, and we've been able to work together as a team and share our common nursing experiences to be able to take care of patients. And we can always use more. We have 14 Togolese nurse aides. These nurse aides were mostly handpicked from the community, those that people had known. Several of them had worked construction at the hospital site during those many years of building, and the team was so impressed with them that they selected them for nurse aid training. And before we opened, they held nurse aid training for these people. People had no idea. Some were storekeepers, some were masons, all kind of different jobs, and they desired to keep working with the hospital, and they were trained. These are some of our best coworkers. They truly want to work. They want to take care of their friends and neighbors, and they work hard, harder than you can imagine, even though they just like anyone here too. I mean, they have families, and in some ways even more. Life is a little bit harder there, and some of them are farming on the side. They work all night. They go sleep for a few hours and go out and farm their land just to have food so that their family can eat. But amazing people. Most of them are Muslim. We made that decision to hire non-believers in the hospital, as this is different than the one in the South. They had always hired Christians. But our desire was to be able to work alongside these non-believers, whether they're Muslim or even some Catholics, to be able to minister to them and have them build a relationship with them and have them see what it is to love Christ and work alongside us and be able to really impact their lives and allow them to be in an environment where they're free to ask questions. Sometimes they are intimidated coming to a Bible study if they're invited to a local Bible study, because everyone of their neighbors would know that they're going to a Bible study. But they can come to work, and everyone knows it's a Christian hospital, but that's okay. They're there to work. But while there, they can ask us questions. And we have several aides who actively talk to the nurses, the Christian nurses and other staff, and ask them questions about the Bible and the difference between Christianity and Islam, and very engaged. So I think later on it's one of the prayer requests, but pray for the nurse aides specifically. We've had some great relationships with them, and I pray that continues, but that these nurse aides will come to Christ as well through the ministry of being able to work with them alongside them in the hospital. We also hope, and I'll mention a little bit about the nursing school coming up, but we also hope several of these nurse aides will then be able to go on to nurse training, become nurses, serving alongside of us. They have some great potential. My role as nursing supervisor, as I said, I worked alongside Yalvi, and he handled a lot of that cultural interactions, helped to be the liaison for me between the American or the Western nurses and the Togolese nurses. A lot of differences, even though the Togolese nurses are trained in a nursing school at a mission hospital, and they're trained predominantly by Western professors, there's still definitely differences in work. Say the mentality, like how to do things and what needs to be done, and the priorities and so stuff like that. And so it takes a lot of work, and so to integrate a staff that's so international, and so that's where Yavi and I were able to come together and help figure out, okay, how do we address this when we want to present something to the staff? How do we do it in a way that's appropriate for the Togolese, but also appropriate for the Americans or the Western nurses, so that neither group are upset per se by what we're doing. So my role was working with him, with doing scheduling. As you can see the numbers there, I think I have over 40 staff members that I was responsible for making schedules for, figuring out, learning some Togolese labor laws, and how I can balance our what we needed, the hours we needed for staff, and also fit it into a Togolese culture. Also then, by default, became the person to troubleshoot whether the equipment that's not working, computer systems, when there's issues. The Togolese are not as familiar with computers, and so they get trained and they know how to do things by rote memory, really. And unfortunately, the computer system is mostly in English, and so they don't always have a clue what they're reading. And so just to be able to be there as a resource and help them out, answer their questions. A lot of times, a lot of questions with billing in terms of the computer system part of it. Helping coordinate liaison between the pharmacy, between the lab, and just often I felt like I was just there to troubleshoot. That was a big part of my job, as well as working on the floor at times as one of the staff nurses, as staffing required. So praises. I've addressed some of these, but as you can see, so 14,000 people have registered, and as I said, many of those have come back multiple times, and whenever they come back, they don't come by themselves. They come with at least one family member, but usually a lot more than that. You're talking a whole family comes together. It's a day to hang out at the hospital. Even if it means sitting outside the clinic all day long, they're there. But that means all those family members are also exposed to the gospel. Inpatient-wise, every nursing ward has a TV, and the chaplain program, they show the Jesus film. There's several other films that they have, evangelistic films in the local dialects that they put on the TV and they run. And you often walk into a ward, and there are more family members in the ward than patients, and it's like a theater. They're all gathered around the TV, and they're all watching. And people talk to the chaplains and say, I've never even heard of Jesus before. I didn't even know about this. It is a TV that's also enthralling, but they're enthralled by the story. They watch through the Jesus film and different parts of that story and Jesus being crucified, and it affects them in such a way. So you look at that number of 14,000 people registered, and those people that came and spent a day, a week, a month in our hospital, and all the family members that came during that time and sat with them and watched the Jesus film, exposed to the gospel. As well as having the chaplains go around every day and pray with the patients if they're willing, and then talk with them if they want to hear more. Because of these, as these patients hear it, they go back to their villages, they talk to the chaplains and say, hey, we want you to come and do a Bible study. We want to hear more about this. And as a result of that, there's 12 villages now that are having Bible studies because someone in the village heard the gospel and asked the chaplains to come out to their village and come share. And that's one of the pictures. You can see them gathered around the top right and the bottom left, being able to teach the gospel, the bottom one going through the story of hope. You can see the guy on the ground there, a Muslim guy with his prayer cap on, attentively listening to the gospel story. And what you can't see in the picture, they said in the background, his brother doing prayers to Allah, doing his daily prayers while they're teaching the gospel. And at this point, there's more people who want to have Bible studies than there are chaplains have time to get out to all these villages. And what a praise, that's what we're there for. We're there to do physical care, and God's doing amazing work in healing physically, but we're there to share the gospel, and these people are hearing. In the top picture, we have two of our chaplains, Togolese chaplains, had never been baptized. They were saved. One was saved as a result of the ministry of the first ABW missionary that was there in Mongo, through a relationship in teaching. And then that guy, when he got saved, he started sharing with this other chaplain, and eventually this chaplain got saved as well. And now they're chaplains at the hospital, and they said, hey, we've never been baptized. And just recently, they went out to pretty much our only lake, the local lake, and after rainy season when there was actually water there, and they were baptized. So what a praise that you see the local believers growing in their faith and wanting to follow the Lord. It's SD cards, so the little cards that use often for us are in our phones or something. They have those cards. The chaplains are able to put the Jesus film on them or other evangelistic videos, I think even copies of the Bible in different dialects. They put these on these SD cards, and the people take them, and not only do they use them in their phones, but Togo have devices that they're able to put them into like little speakers, like real radios. They can play them on their radios. They can put them, they have headphones, basically they have a SD slot they put them into. So these people go back to their villages where they don't have power per se, or at least very little of the day, but they can listen to it on their little portable radio, or they can listen to it on these portable speakers, and they can take it away from the hospital and travel. We have patients coming from days' journeys away, and so they can go back and they still can listen to the Bible or listen to the Jesus film in their local dialect. And so 5 to 10 of those every week are being given to people or sold to them. People come in all the time asking the chaplains, hey, I want to buy this, or my neighbor gave me one and I want another one of them. And that's a big part of the ministry. So as I alluded to, many professions of faith. Chaplains are constantly talking to people in the clinic, in the inpatient. The picture there, the lady in the hospital bed, just praising God. She never heard about Jesus, and now she did, made a profession of faith. No, I want to know him. While she lays there sick. And I believe she died a few days later, but she was able to come to Christ through the ministry of the hospital before she passed away. We talked about those that are pregnant, they're coming in, getting prenatal care, but often the girls come in, and then young girls who either are pregnant because they were raped or pregnant out of wedlock. And though that happens in the U.S. too, that is a very, very shameful thing. And many of them are pressured by their family to have abortions, but there obviously are nowhere to have a medical abortion. And so if they do have an abortion, they do it themselves, and then they come in very sick because of that, because they cause other damage by doing that, besides losing the baby. So having these women come in for prenatal care, and even if when they do tell the provider that they are thinking about aborting, being able to counsel them and get them hooked up with a chaplain and say, no, we want you to keep this baby, even if you have to give it up to adoption to a family member. We want you to keep it. And we've had several that have come back and said, I've decided to keep this baby. I'm going to deliver. And even one who came recently and delivered that baby after the counseling. We praise God that we're able to save those lives and be able to minister to these girls in a time that's scary for them, in a time where much of their community and their family are ostracizing them and they don't feel loved. We can show them love. We can say we don't want you to have an abortion, but we love you regardless of what your situation is. Whatever happened, that doesn't matter right now. We still love you, and we want to tell you about God, the God who will love you and can give you hope. And then, shout out to my dad who came for 6 weeks, but we've had quite a few medical, or their providers, nurses, nurse aide. Actually, I had an American nurse aide for 6 months come out and help. All kind of different volunteers that have come out and helped us. And it's been a godsend every time, especially in malaria season when we had so many patients, to be able to have that extra help. And we thank God for those that He's called to come out and serve, even for a short amount of time. So prayer requests, and many of these I've alluded to. As we see many people come to Christ, and we see these villages having Bible studies, we really like you to pray that God would raise up the men. Often, many times, especially in the hospital, it's the women that are there. They come in and take care of the patients. Unlike American hospitals or Western medicine, the family is responsible for giving them the food and changing their beds and bathing them. That's all done by the family, and that's cultural. But that's usually done by women. So the women are the ones sitting at the bedside. They're the ones hearing the Jesus film. And even though you have men who've heard, we want men to stand up and become leaders in their community and the different tribes. The names that are up there are ones that are just recent believers. Pray that they'll have the courage to make a stand for Christ, and that they will become leaders in their community. Bukari, Hari, Fuseni, Amadou, Isafu, Aya, Sumaya, that these men would continue to be discipled and that they'd be able to lead their families. Sensitivity as we share the gospel. We want to do it culturally appropriate, in a way that's not offensive to the community, to those that we're talking to, but that the gospel is still clearly shared. And we're still learning alongside Togolese Christians how best to do that. How can we do that and still be culturally sensitive? But that we can do that for us, our coworkers, the nurse aides, the others that are Muslim, that we're able to share the gospel with them in a clear way, but appropriately. Patients, friends, and neighbors. We live out in the community. Both Ann and I live in different areas of Mongo, and we have Togolese neighbors that we're able to minister to them. For wisdom, energy, and stamina, good health for the medical staff. As I said, I keep going back to malaria season, but it was a rough few months. Very busy, long hours, and we're not immune from malaria either. I had it. Dad, unfortunately, got it, even though he was there for 6 months or 6 weeks. And poor Anna's had it 3 times. So we take our prophylaxis medicine, but it's not a guarantee you won't get it. And that's the same for all of our staff. There's a lot of things that we're not used to out there, and we're being exposed to things that the patients bring in and just daily life. But it's not just us, the Togolese as well. That we just have the energy and stamina we need as we're looking, and we're almost to a year now at the hospital, and this will just keep on going. God will give us energy that we need, that we'll still be able to love patients as they show up, that we don't consider them a burden. That's what we're there for, to take care of them. But sometimes when you're seeing the umpteenth seizing child in a day, you're fatigued and your compassion isn't where it should be. That we just have the compassion of Christ, and we're still able to show love to that child and his or her parents. For medical providers, nurses, nurse aides, we still need staff. Much of our nursing staff is short-term, even though it's long short-term. By the summer, a lot have finished their commitments and will be returning to the U.S. We do have some more that have committed to come, but we still need more. So pray that the Lord will continue providing providers for us. If you know anyone who's interested, even 4 weeks is a great amount of time to come out and be able to provide some help, medical. And if you're not medical, you can talk to me anyway, and I'm sure depending on what you do, we can use you as well. There's many aspects of our ministry there in Togo. That's not all hospital. That's my focus. That's what I'm talking about. But there's other areas that you can minister as well. For the nursing school, I mentioned a little bit. They've had that nursing school in the South for, I think, since the early 80s. I don't know, when did the hospital open? 85? So I think they started the first class right before in 1990. And they've had several down there. And now our goal is to have kind of a branch school. we're looking at having a class both in the south and the north starting at the same time this coming summer. And so that way you have professors, instead of having the students travel, there's many reasons we don't want to have all our students down in the south. We want Togolese who are from Mongo area, northern Togo, who speak the dialects of the people that we serve, who are used to being in that culture. We want them to train and work at our hospital, even during training, so that they're more effective when they do actually start working for us. And so for that reason, we're trying to do this split class. So those that work in the south will stay down there, and those that work in the north will stay in the north. And the professors will travel, do like modules, teach in one place, come up and teach in the next place, and while they're not teaching, the students will be doing clinicals. So a lot of details to work out, funds to raise. Originally they weren't planning on as many students as we'll end up with 2 classes, and so we still need to raise more money to be able to cover the cost of providing education to these nursing students. But pray also for wisdom as we select students. The word went out a couple weeks before Christmas, I think, maybe early December, saying, hey, we have positions open, and it's complicated hiring practices there in Togo, and more than you want to know. But the first part of the process went out, the word went out, applications are coming in, and it's just an overwhelming number. Even with the criteria that we set, it's an overwhelming. Everybody wants a job, and they want a job at the hospital, and they know it's a good job. And so we'll get to the point where we'll have to start going through them. I'm sure they've already started. And we want to choose the best candidates. Again, our goal is not to choose all believers, though we want a majority in the class to be believers. We want a few that, if they qualify academically and everything else, we want them, even if they're not believers, we want a few, just because we want to be able to minister to them in that way as well. And like I said, we have several nurse aides who we think would make excellent nurses, who have shown themselves by their conduct that they would make good nurses, and we want them to be in the class, and we hope that they would qualify. But it takes a lot of wisdom in knowing who to choose. These people will be in that training for 3 years, and then we hope to work in our hospital. So that's a long-term commitment. Not that they can't be asked to leave the class if they don't make it academically or they violate the code of ethics or anything, but we don't want that to happen. So just pray that all those details would be worked out in the next coming months, that this class would be able to be started on time in June, so that these students could start. That's still 3 years then down the road for graduation. So it's a long-term plan, but a lot of wisdom, a lot of prayer has gone into it already. As some of you may know, in November, Mongo was not so peaceful. Starting early November, and then again at our Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, the end of November, that the people in Mongo started protesting a decision by the Togolese government that was taking some of their land, make it into a wildlife refuge. It gets very complicated, and we're still learning the different parts by talking to our friends. But so the people decided they were protesting, and unfortunately, the protests turned violent from both sides. The townspeople attacking the police and the military, and then the police and military responding with a very heavy hand. And we had several days, 2 different times in November, where violence broke out. We had many people come to the hospital, several with gunshot wounds, some serious wounds from beatings, and we had several who died from the result of the clashes. And though we felt we were not targeted there in Mongo, it has nothing to do with Americans, Westerners. It's not our fight, and they know that, and our hospital wasn't targeted. They tell us, our friends and neighbors tell us, we definitely don't want, nobody wants to do anything to your hospital. We want to go there. So they don't want to target us, but when things get heated, people aren't thinking rationally. It makes for a scary environment, and one that we were taking precautions, spent several nights at the hospital compound so I wouldn't have to drive back through town. So pray that in the coming months that they're able to resolve it peacefully. At this point, I don't think there's been a true resolution. The government, the president kind of put his plans on hold for the moment, so that's why there's peace. The locals are hoping that their concerns will be heard, but we don't know how they're going to be able to solve it to make everyone happy. So pray that God will intervene, and it will be a peaceful resolution. But during this time, if there are any more protests, that He continue to keep us safe. We do praise God that during those two sets of days, none of the hospital staff, none of the missionaries, nobody was injured of our staff. And when you think about the Togolese staff that we have, that's definitely a work of God, because we have a couple hundred Togolese staff throughout the different parts of the hospital, and not one of them were injured. Several lost family members, but none of them personally were injured, and they continued to work. That was God's protection. And then pray also then for wisdom for me. Obviously, I'm going back to Togo here near the end of this month, for the next few months at least. Pray that you just give Anna and me wisdom in terms of our relationship and where that's headed, and then in terms of future plans, in terms of regards of our ministry there in Togo, individually or as a couple. A lot of decisions to make in the next few months. And then for me, for financial support, the Lord's been providing over the last 13 months. I've been in Togo, and He's met my needs, but I'm still currently at 80%, so it's still 20% under supported. So if you pray that God would provide a few more supporters, or if He works in your heart that you want to help support me, just let me know. I can provide information to you for that as well.